New Orleans breathes in rhythm with the dead. It's a city suspended in time. Its gaslit alleys, crumbling mansions, and blood-stained brick facades whisper secrets to those willing to listen. This is a place where the veil between worlds is always thin, where the dead do not rest quietly, and where something ancient stirs beneath the jasmine's sweet air. Beneath the carnival laughter of Bourbon Street and the humid haze of absinthe dreams, there lies something far older and far darker. This isn't just a city of ghosts. It's a city of predators, seductive, immortal, and always hungry. Welcome to Arcane Echoes. I'm your host, Jessica, and tonight we descend into the veiled world of New Orleans vampire legends, where myth bleeds into mystery, where beauty hides horror, and where shadows wear the faces of the eternal. To understand why vampires chose New Orleans, or perhaps why New Orleans conjured vampires, we must go back to its very marrow. Its origin story is soaked in death, ambition, and sacred chaos. Founded in 1718 by the French, New Orleans was never meant to be a paradise. It was carved from mosquito-ridden swampland, dense with heat and the hiss of reptiles. The land itself resisted settlement. It was wild, wet, and heavy with decay. But the French needed a stronghold, a strategic port for trade and colonial dominance, and so they laid claim to the bend in the Mississippi and named it La Nouvelle-la-Lyon, otherwise known as New Orleans. But paradise did not come easily, nor honorably. To populate the struggling colony, France didn't send families or farmers. They emptied their prisons. Vagrants, thieves, debtors, women convicted of petty crimes or accused of prostitution, desperate men clinging to a second chance, and violent men cast from society, arrived together shoulder to shoulder in rotting ships. The earliest streets of New Orleans were shaped not by visionaries, but by survivors, drifters, outcasts, soldiers of fortune and broken souls. The city grew wild without order, without sanctity, and into that moral vacancy the unnatural found root. Africans brought in chains through the port carried with them spiritual traditions rich in ancestor veneration and shape-shifting spirits, belief systems deeper and older than Europe could comprehend. The French brought their countryside tales of revenants, hungry ghosts, and blood-drinking corpses. The Spanish, too, came with superstition and saints, with dark-eyed priests and incense-thick exorcisms. Caribbean immigrants introduced obeah and deppies, spirits who fed on the life force of the living, and indigenous tribes knew the land was already haunted, already inhabited by beings that changed shape, that hunted silently, and took only what they craved. The result? A spiritual supernova. The enslaved brought with them the old gods of West Africa, Vodun, ancestor revenants, ritual power. These beliefs merged with Catholicism and colonial repression to birth Louisiana Voodoo, a system not of spells and dolls, but communion with spirits, with the dead, with forces unseen. And in that charged space, where prayers became incantations and grief became power, the veil thinned, and something else took notice. Vampires, it said, are drawn to energy, to blood, yes, but also to belief. In New Orleans, belief doesn't live behind stained glass. It oozes from the bricks. It dances in candlelight. It is everywhere. The rituals may not summon them, but they welcome them. And when the sick began dying in droves, when yellow fever, cholera, and tuberculosis swept through like spectral reapers, people noticed things. Some corpses drained too quickly. Some children wasted away without cause. Some pale figures were seen roaming the alleyways after sundown. The cemeteries, too full to bury underground, rose into necropolises, cities of the dead stacked high in crumbling stone vaults. In time, the living began to fear the night more than the disease. Shadows moved where light should reign. Gas lamps flickered, extinguished by unseen breath. And always, those eyes, watching, smiling. But New Orleans wasn't built for the living. It was built for the eternal. In the 1720s, the colony was growing, but its population was dangerously unbalanced. Few women had made the voyage across the Atlantic, and men outnumbered them 10 to 1. To civilize the colony and stabilize its future, King Louis XV sent girls from convents in France, young, virginal, devout. They arrived pale from the voyage, carried in long ships that smelled of salt, iron, and mildew. Their wide eyes surveyed the city with equal parts awe and dread. But what drew the most attention were the wooden chests they brought with them, their cassette. Small, narrow, adorned with iron clasps, coffin-shaped, many claimed. And so they were dubbed Les Filles à la Cassette, the Cassette Girls. Soon after the girls were cloistered in the Ursuline convent, people began to die, not from illness, not from accident, but from something far stranger. Bloodless corpses were found in alleys, lips purpled, skin cold. Victims spoke of dreams, of shadowy women with glowing eyes, who whispered ancient words and bent low to feed. The third floor attic, where the girls' cassettes were stored, was sealed, the windows nailed shut with iron, said to have been blessed by priests. Some even claim the Vatican itself ordered the shutters to be sealed. Nuns claimed to hear footsteps overhead after dark, not rats, not wood creaking, but the sound of pacing, slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Over the centuries, no one has dared reopen the attic, not even during storms when the shutters groan as though something claws from the inside. One of the most enduring stories, often shared in hushed tones by French Quarter tour guides, dates to the 1970s. According to legend, two amateur paranormal investigators snuck into the convent one night with tape recorders and flashlights. There are no police records, no news coverage, but as the tale goes, the next morning they were found collapsed at the convent's front steps, white as candles, bloodless. Their tape recorder, some say, played only static, and a single phrase repeated over and over. Nous n'avons jamais dormi. We have never slept. Whether myth or something more, the attic remains closed to this day, and whatever was brought to New Orleans in those narrow chests may never have left. Spring 1932. The Great Depression loomed like a storm cloud. In the French Quarter, jazz tried to drown despair with sound, but the air was thick with heat, hunger, and something else. Something colder than the breeze off the Mississippi. That morning, a young woman stumbled from a narrow townhouse on Royal Street. Her dress was torn, her wrists bloodied, and hastily bandaged. Her eyes were wide, almost hollow. She collapsed on the steps of a nearby business, whispering a name. Carter. Police were summoned. They expected delirium. Instead, they heard a story that would burrow into the bones of the city itself. She told them she'd been held by two men, John and Wayne Carter, dock workers by day, quiet, unassuming. But by night, they changed. They chained her in the back room, and every evening they would take just a little of her blood, never enough to kill, just enough to keep her weak, submissive, and silent. Police raided the Carter apartment. What they found wasn't chaos, it was control. 4 more victims sat bound to chairs, gaunt, dazed, still alive, but barely. Each had identical cuts at the wrist, bandaged carefully, methodically. They had been drained repeatedly over what doctors estimated to be weeks. Not killed, preserved. Inside the apartment, they found journals, pages filled with obsessive notes, tracking feeding times, blood volumes, symptoms. It was clinical, cold, and practiced. John and Wayne Carter were arrested. Their trial was quick, brutal, and public. No explanation was ever offered by the brothers. They simply stared forward in silence, as if they didn't understand why they'd been caught. They were convicted and executed. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, when the Carter family tomb in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 was opened to make room for another relative, it was found empty. The brothers' coffins were gone. Since then, for decades, sightings have poured in. 2 men, tall, pale, well-dressed, in out-of-time coats, seen walking in step just off Royal Street, often near the old apartment where it all began. Always at twilight, always silent. Bar workers have reported them entering clubs just before closing, only to vanish without ever being seen leaving. Tourists have seen them standing at the edge of Jackson Square during full moons, eyes like glass, fixed on nothing or everything. No one's ever captured a clear photo. No one's ever approached them. And those who do claim that the moment they turn to speak, the brothers smile, not cruelly, not kindly, but with teeth. He was known by many names: the Comte Saint Germain, Jacques, the man who never died. Some say he was born in the 1600s, others whisper that he was never born at all. In the salons of Versailles, he moved like smoke, enigmatic, refined, always observing. He dazzled kings and composers. He painted, composed, spoke fluent Latin, Sanskrit, Greek, and more. He knew things he shouldn't have: minute details of long dead empires, secret rites, the personal scandals of monarchs buried for centuries. And through it all, he never aged. He never ate in public. He drank only from a slender crystal goblet. Some said it was wine, others something thicker, something darker. He vanished from Europe near the end of the 18th century, leaving behind a trail of curiosity and fear. But whispers soon followed: a sighting in St. Petersburg, a letter from Vienna, a figure matching his description boarding a ship in Amsterdam. Records from 1890 place a J. Saint Germain aboard a steamer bound for the Americas. Destination: New Orleans. The city suited him. It was decadent, secretive, steeped in ritual and rot. In the early 1900s, a man named Jacques Saint Germain took residence in a stately home at the corner of Royal and Ursulines. He was wealthy, magnetic, dressed in perfectly tailored 18th century fashion. He threw lavish parties where absinthe flowed freely and laughter rang long into the night, but no one ever saw him eat. He moved like someone unbothered by time. Then, one night, a woman leapt from his balcony in terror. She survived, just barely. She claimed Jacques had tried to bite her, drain her. Her wounds were clean, precise, almost surgical. The police arrived, the townhouse was deserted, but inside they found something haunting. They found portraits, dozens of them, oil painted, crumbling with age. In each, the same man, unchanged, centuries apart, always watching. In bottles, dozens of bottles, arranged on a glass shelf like vintage wine. But these held no wine, only blood. Jacques was never found. He didn't flee. He vanished. But he is still seen, leaning against a gas lamp in Jackson Square, drifting through the French market in the fog before dawn, staring from a rain-soaked balcony with eyes that have seen empires rise and fall. He is elegant eternal, hunger eternal. In New Orleans, she is his eternal feast. Vampires don't just haunt the past. In New Orleans, a real, modern vampire community thrives here. People who identify as sanguine, psychic, or energy vampires. Some drink small amounts of blood from willing donors. Others feed on emotion, connection, attention. Most follow strict ethics, confidentiality, and consent. They meet in hidden lounges, behind velvet curtains, under flickering chandeliers in the Garden District. And when the music swells and the shadows grow, they come alive. To outsiders, it's theater, but to the initiated, it's truth. Identity. Hunger wrapped in ritual. They don't sparkle, they don't slumber in coffins. They pay rent, they work, they wait. And in the right light, the reflection might disappear. When Anne Rice published Interview with a Vampire in 1976, she did more than write a novel. She resurrected a mythology. She gave voice to the longing and hunger that linger in the immortal soul. Set in the heart of New Orleans, her tale of Louis and Lestat did not merely romanticize the vampire, it redefined them. These weren't mindless monsters, they were reflective, wounded, exquisitely beautiful creatures cursed with forever. Rice's New Orleans drips with atmosphere, gaslight flickering through fog, mournful carriages passing cemeteries, the rustle of silk gowns, and whispers of regret behind shuttered windows. The city's shadowed corners came alive in her words. Her Garden District mansion became a place of pilgrimage, and to her fans, Lestat became real. Through the Vampire Chronicles, she transformed New Orleans into a Gothic cathedral of blood and beauty. But Rice wasn't alone in spinning her stories. In 2013, the CW's The Originals brought New Orleans into the home of millions. Centered on the ancient and powerful Michelson family, the series reimagined the French Quarter as a battleground of immortal dynasties. Here, vampires ruled behind iron gates and charm-filled smiles, feuding with witches who cursed the bloodlines beneath the Spanish moss. The originals leaned into the city's Baroque decadence. Candlelit rituals in church ruins, shadowy dances in Bourbon mansions, blood spilled in moonlit courtyards. The very architecture of New Orleans became the bones of the story. The cracked facades, the wrought iron balconies, the marble tombs etched with names long forgotten. The city was not a setting, it was a breathing entity, entwined with magic and menace. Other series and films followed. American Horror Story, Coven laced its witches into the city's fabric, while vampire documentaries filmed among the gravestones of Lafayette Cemetery and the neon-tinged corners of Decatur Street. Independent horror films used its alleys as hunting grounds, its fog as a cloak. In pop culture, New Orleans has become a fixed star in the vampire constellation. From books to screens, it is always the same, a city of enchantment, seduction, and lingering dread. A place where the camera lingers on crimson wine in a glass, and where we're left wondering if it's really wine at all. Because in New Orleans, fiction has a way of becoming real, and in the quiet moments, when the jazz fades and the gas lamps flicker, the vampires might just open their eyes. Legends make the city, but witness accounts keep them alive. New Orleans is a city layered in stories, some recorded in yellowed archives, others passed from bartender to tourist over a late-night Sazerac. While many vampire legends are wrapped in metaphor and lore, there are those who claim to have seen them, met them, even survived them. These are the witness accounts, fragmented, whispered, and chilling, that suggest vampires may not just be relics of imagination, but part of the very fabric of the city. In October 1974, a Tulane University student named Claire D. reported an unsettling encounter while walking home from a Halloween party. She noticed a woman standing under a flickering street lamp, tall, bone-thin, in an antiquated black lace gown. Thinking it was a costume, Claire smiled and greeted her. The woman turned slowly, revealing eyes that were entirely black. Claire says she felt a sudden wave of dizziness and had to brace against a wrought iron fence. I blinked, Claire later told local folklorist, and she was standing inches from me. I never saw her move. She ran. For weeks afterward, she reported feeling lethargic, dizzy, and claimed she'd wake with fresh bruises and a strange metallic taste in her mouth. No official report was filed, but Claire's account was later shared in a 1981 thesis on urban supernatural phenomena in New Orleans. Between 1953 and 1958, at least 7 individuals were reported missing in or around the French Quarter, most last seen leaving jazz clubs alone after midnight. Police files remain sealed, but newspaper clippings from the Times-Picayune mention a growing unease about young men vanishing near Bourbon and Ursulines. An anonymous bartender from the period later described a tall, striking man with unusually sharp features and an Old World accent who frequented several local clubs. He only ever ordered red wine, but he never drank it. Each time he visited, someone went missing. The pattern stopped abruptly in spring 1958. No suspect was ever arrested, no bodies were ever recovered. Multiple taxi drivers since the 1990s have reported picking up a pale couple dressed in all black, often near St. Louis Cemetery, Number 1, or the Garden District. They never speak above a whisper, they give vague destinations and vanish from locked back seats. One driver, Louis R., shared his experience in 2004. I dropped them off in front of a closed gate on Burgundy. They didn't walk through the gate. They just walked into the fog. I blinked, and they were gone. My rearview mirror cracked the second they stepped out. The story has been told with minor variations dozens of times. Always the same description: pale skin, antique clothing, glassy eyes, and always silence. In 2015, researcher Dr. John Edgar Browning published findings from a study conducted in New Orleans on individuals who self-identify as vampires. One man, known only as M, claimed to be a hybrid, both psychic and sanguine. He explained his need to drink blood from consensual donors, not for the thrill or ritual, but for survival. M detailed his rules: never harm, never feed without consent, never reveal his true nature casually. But when asked how long he'd lived in New Orleans, he smiled and said, "Let's just say I was here before there was jazz." Dr. Browning concluded that while these individuals may not possess supernatural powers, their sincerity and their secrecy suggested a deeply entrenched subculture. A lesser-known report comes from local musician Theo L., who was walking home from a gig around 3 a.m. when he claims he was approached by a man with silver eyes, who asked him very politely for permission to feed. Theo thought it was a joke. He laughed. Then the man leaned close and whispered, "Your laughter tastes like cloves." Theo passed out. He awoke hours later behind a dumpster, uninjured but cold. He still has no memory of what happened next. He now wears a clove of garlic on a leather cord when performing in the quarter. Tour guide and folklorist Maria Laveau, no relation to the famed Voodoo queen, has kept a log of strange sightings and guest reports over 15 years of walking tours. Among them, a guest fainting at the Ursuline convent after claiming someone was watching them from the third-floor window, a man collapsing at Jackson Square while pointing to a pale figure leaning against a lamppost, only for the figure to vanish when others looked. A young woman who brought her father's ashes to the city and claimed to see him smiling at her from a darkened balcony in the French Quarter. But his eyes, she whispered to Maria, were not his. They were ancient. These stories may lack proof, but they don't lack weight. Some names change, some vanish altogether, but in New Orleans, the vampire myth lives not because of what we know, but because of what we feel. A chill down Dauphine Street, a shadow on Charters, a presence just out of sight. And if you ever meet a stranger with a voice like velvet and eyes that never blink, maybe don't invite them in. Thank you for walking beside me through the haunted heart of New Orleans, through alleys lined with blood-soaked legends, and into the breathless stillness where eternity waits. The city pulses with hunger and memory. It is beauty entwined with dread, jazz and death dancing in step. And this is only our first bite. If tonight's journey stirred something in you, share it with a fellow seeker of shadows. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And let the next tale find you before the sun does. Because even now, as the lamplight dims and the river sings its midnight hymn, eyes are watching. A glass is waiting to be filled, and maybe your story is just beginning. Until we meet again, stay strange, stay safe, and never trust what smiles after midnight.